Brand new hour of America's Newsroom. Lots to wade through here this morning.
Just another day, kid, you know? Just another day. For Martha, I'm Bill. Good morning. Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta and a left-wing activist in one of these emails talking about the strategy to spark a revolution in the Catholic Church. The head of Voices for Progress writing, quote, there needs to be a Catholic spring in which Catholic beginning of a little democracy and respect for gender equality in the Catholic Church, end quote. Something in here for everyone, isn't there? Ed Henry live there in D.C. And Ed, good morning to you. The controversy, it plays into Trump's hands. How?
Because he is trying to fire up conservatives right now, voters, values voters. People with faith who may be struggling to actually turn out for Donald Trump since he's behind Ben saying leave Islam alone. And yet here they are talking about a revolution within the Catholic Church. Then look at the fact that in these John Podesta, you see him there, Jennifer Palmieri, before the campaign, they also actually comment on Rupert Murdoch, the executive chairman of 21st Century Fox, raising his children as Catholics. And John Halpin at the Liberal Center for American Progress, which Podesta used to run, saying, quote, it's an amazing bastardization of the faith. They must be attracted to the systemic thought and severely backwards gender relations and must be totally unaware of Christian democracy. To which Jen Palmieri responds, I imagine they think it is the most socially acceptable, politically conservative religion their rich friends wouldn't understand if they became evangelicals, to which Donald Trump jumped all over this. Watch.
New emails also show members of the Clinton team viciously attacking Catholics and evangelicals. They attack Catholics and evangelicals viciously. And that won't be tolerated, but it won't be tolerated by the voters.
Evangelicals, Catholics may sit on the sidelines, not turn out for Donald Trump. Now they're looking at these emails saying they might fire up.
You mentioned Palmieri. How has she responded on this, Ed?
Well, what you keep hearing from both Jen Palmieri, John Podesta, and others is that this is all about the Russians hacking into emails, but they're not directly denying that these emails are accurate. Watch Palmieri.
I'm a Catholic. I don't recognize that email that we saw. And this whole effort is led by the Russians. The Russians, ones that orchestrated this hack.
And then look at this other email from Joel Benenson, Clinton's chief strategist, saying at one point, quote, do we have any sense for Clinton what she believes or wants her core message to be? Remarkable, because that's at the heart of Hillary Clinton's struggles from the very beginning of this campaign to exactly explain who she is, what she was president. And yet, Bill, after all that, she's still winning.
Ed, thanks. Ed Henry in Washington on that. Thank you. 3 past the hour now.
Dig deeper on some of this here. Donald Trump demanding that the New York Times retract a story in which 2 women accuse him of sexual assault. One told the New York Times that Trump groped and kissed her on an airplane back in the 80s. Another says that he kissed her when they were waiting for an elevator together when she worked at Trump Tower. That one's also a long time ago as well. Plus, a former beauty queen says Trump would walk into their dressing room at the Miss USA pageants.
Our first introduction to him was when we were at the dress rehearsal and half naked changing into our bikinis. He just came strolling right in. There was no second to put a robe on or any sort of clothing or anything. Some girls were.
Is the assistant editor for the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, and he joins us now. James, good morning to you.
Good to be here. Thanks.
We'll start with Trump, and then we'll go to the WikiLeaks part of the story that's new today as well. Tough stuff for him to get through today.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know if this is true, but it looks like in terms of his personal behavior, he's not quite as bad as Bill Clinton, but he's getting there in these stories. So we have a situation where we have 2, especially for conservative voters, kind of 2 despicable people, and you need to decide what the policy is that you want over the next 4 years.
What do you think is the best strategy for him to deal with this?
Well, I think, although I would not have recommended his Sunday night move of rehashing some of the Clinton scandals, I think he actually pulled it off. And I think he made it plain that his behavior really shouldn't be disqualifying when you compare it to the ethical failings of the Clintons. So I think now, going forward, I've been hoping at some point he would talk more about economic growth and
days, although I do think there's a lot of people out there would really like to hear more about the future of the country and stuff that matters more, but he's going to have to deal with this in his set of equations here. Sure. I also want to take a look at some of these WikiLeaks because they give us a pretty interesting window into the period right before the bleach bit kicked in on the Clinton server, and it tells you what was going back and forth among her advisors, scrambling. You know, what are we going to do about these requests from Trey Gowdy to have this server and to have all of the emails turned over? Here's the first one that I want to pull up. This is from one of her top advisors. It says, rather than going around and around on how to release the 55,000, we can say even if state has equities, meaning I think he means the same emails that we have, not providing them would put her in legal jeopardy. He says, and let's go on to the next one that we have. Oh, this is a page 2 of the same one, excuse me. Or we say happy for them to have it, happy for the public to read them as soon as state is comfortable. But let's somehow take advantage of this, he says. Then let's look. The House subpoenas just for Libya, right? We were discussing releasing everything. No? And that's a question from Robbie Mook. The third one goes on to say, worth remembering, though, that Gowdy last week on the record said his committee doesn't have the authority to seek her server, which would be good news for them, I guess. And later, this is all in March. Right. Days later, that the server was bleach bitted at Platte River Networks after they had a conference call. And it was also March, that Hillary Clinton had that press conference, and we now see that these emails are more evidence of all of the untruths that she told. Obviously, this was not about convenience. Her server. Obviously, this was not a question of just separating the wedding and yoga emails from the work emails. You have here while the material is under subpoena, to protect her legal liability, how to protect her political future, and I don't know how the intent is, at least expressed in these emails, is anything but full and fair disclosure and response to a congressional subpoena. Yeah, I mean, and we know that they didn't turn everything over in the end. So, you know, they obviously made decisions, it would appear, based on this, James, to turn over some things and not other things. You hear Robbie Mook saying, you know, just the Libya stuff, right? So they're making decisions about what to turn over and what not, which is not at all what the FBI requested. Right, and remember, this American people, everything that's job-related, this all, of course, it never should have been on her private server in the first place. It should have been in the State Department system. But this does not belong to them. This is not for them to judge what they would like to release and what they would not. This is not for them to decide what's politically useful and what's not, and the sequence and the timing. When it's under subpoena, it should have been turned over years before, obviously, but that's when they really should have coughed it up. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, this is all public information that was done by the Secretary of State, and therefore it is basic in people. So it's astonishing. James, thank you very much. Good to have you here today. Good to be here. Thanks. You bet.
Hi, Martha. We've been looking over here, trying to figure this thing out right now in the balance of power, because so much attention is given to these battleground states right days away from the election. Here's what we got right now on the U.S. Senate, and this is going to be a battle. Possibly late into the night come election night. It's 54 Republican, 46 Democrat. 2 of the 46 are listed, but they caucus with Democrats. That's why you have the split right here. 51's your majority. If we go to the maps right now, to our what if section here, this is at the presidential level, and we've drilled down on this a lot, and we'll continue to over the next 3.5 weeks. On the Senate, This is the current configuration. So we put a little what-if scenario in place here. At 54-46, right up here in the northeast of New Hampshire. So far, Kelly Ayotte seems to be doing pretty well in her re-elect. Republicans were able to hold that. They would obviously maintain the seat and continue to look at the potential for majority. For Democrats, though, this is what is looking better for them by the day. In Wisconsin, you've got a great rematch here between Russ Feingold and Ron Johnson. And right now, Feingold has an edge in that. Same, too, for Tammy Duckworth over Mark Kirk in the state of Illinois. She leads him right now 7-8 points based on the averages all put together. But then you move way out here in the West, and Joe Heck is running for the Senate there in Nevada. This is Harry Reid's seat that will be vacated. Right now, Heck is holding on to an advantage out there, which would bode in Nevada. Marco Rubio down here in Florida, been watching this. 2 months over his challenger. So it would look as if Republicans at the moment may be able to hold that seat. North Carolina, keep an eye on that. Not sure how it's going right now based on early voting and turnout, but again, this will be something we're watching late into the night, especially with Nevada closing late, Martha. So something to watch.
Day by day, it sure is. Thanks. So more on the fallout over the WikiLeaks emails that we were just going through and the comments that Clinton staffers made about faith, about religion, the Catholic religion, evangelical, that.
Also, Martha, only days away from the third and final presidential debate moderated by Chris Wallace. Topics are out, what they are, and dive into them in a moment.
Plus, the former House Speaker John Boehner says no matter who wins the White House, we all lose. Dire words. We'll explain.
More and more issues, because they can't be dealt with.
Backed by Iran and their allies.
Important story. Watch it now. A stark warning in the meantime on the outcome of the race in 26 days. Former House Speaker John Boehner is saying no matter who wins the election, as he told Brit Hume last night, he says America's in trouble.
Both of these candidates for president have painted themselves into a pretty far corner, and their ability to move beyond the people who elected them to work toward the middle to get things done, I think is going to be severely tested. And so you're going to see more and more issues in our society end up in the court system and eventually end up in the Supreme Court.
Wow.
And that's where the real action is going to be.
Oh. Steve Hilton, former senior advisor to Prime Minister David Cameron and CEO of CrowdPact, and Richard Fallis, a radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. And gentlemen, good day to both of you. I was watching this interview last night, and it reminded me of how clear thinking and talking Speaker Boehner is. Steve, what he is saying is that the next president determines the course of America. Go.
Well, that's right, and that's why it's such a shame that the presidential election is not about the course of America. It's about superficial things that really have nothing to do with the big choice that the country faces. So I thought it was helpful that he put the argument for the seriousness of the election, and I just wish that the candidates, frankly, on both sides would live up to that and actually start talking about some of the big choices we face. And I think if they did that, particularly on the right, on the Republican side, they would find that they basically agree. If you look at Trump's agenda and you look at the agenda of the GOP in Congress, there is so much that they agree on, and I just don't understand why they can't really focus on that because of the stakes being so high, just as Boehner said.
What did you think about Boehner's comments? He's basically arguing that executive order runs America, and if you want to challenge that order, you take it to the courts, and if you take it to the courts over the next 4 to 8 years, it will be the U.S. Supreme Court, and you will have maybe 3 or 4 judges that are determined by the next president. That was his large point.
And Hemmer, I think, Bill, I think that Speaker Boehner, I never agree with him, but he's actually right on this point. And if you look at our Supreme Court is not young by any stretch or means of the imagination. So last week, there was a case about Apple versus Samsung on which phones were which one. And I asked myself the question, do any of these Supreme Court folks even know what an iPhone and a Samsung is? I mean, let's just be real. So I think what millennials are saying is exactly what John Boehner is saying. Our Congress, Washington is broken. And because representatives on the House and the Senate side don't want to work with the White House, no matter who's elected, whether it's Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, you have this executive order run government. We need a government that actually works for the American people who work every day. And for that to become a reality, either Hillary Clinton's going to have to win with an overwhelming majority and have coattails both in the Senate and the House, or Donald Trump will.
You sound like a Republican.
No. It's broken. Broke is broke.
I'm just saying. That's what I hear.
He sounds like not just any Republican. He sounds like Donald Trump. That's probably the first time Richard's heard that.
Okay, right. More from Boehner last night than a very specific question about each one of them. Go.
I believe that Donald Trump's view of who these judges should be is much closer to where I am than the judges that Hillary Clinton would appoint.
So you plan to vote for Trump?
I'm going to vote for him.
And his seeming lack of knowledge about so much of what the president's involved doesn't bother you?
There's a lot of things that I disagree with Donald on. But as I said, the most important thing about this election is who these judges are going to be appointed.
Okay, now, Steve, who has made the better case about the future for the court so far in this campaign? Has it been Donald Trump or has it been Hillary Clinton?
I don't think that either of them have made the case strongly enough, because they're not talking about that kind of serious question enough. Even though both of them say we want to talk about the issues and we don't want to focus on all this other stuff, that's ended up being the things that they talk about most of the time. I think that the answer to your question, who's made the best case, honestly depends on which side you're on. If you're on the left, then you would say Hillary has made a good case about the key issues, for example, campaign finance reform, that a changed court might be able to really make a difference on. But equally, if you're on the right, then you care very much about other issues where appointees made by Donald Trump would really result in the outcomes you want. So I don't think you could say that either of them have really won the argument on this.
Richard, I've heard Trump say a lot how much is on the line with justices. And he's put out at least two different lists of justices, or judges rather, that he would consider. Who's made the stronger case? Is it Trump or is it Clinton, do you believe?
Well, I think you have to go a step further, right? You have to go and look at, I would say the Democratic Party has made a stronger case for judges, and I'll tell you why. Right now there's a vacancy because of Scalia's death, and we have Merrick Garland who's sitting in the Senate, and Republicans refuse to consider him. They won't even have a hearing. If they cared about the Supreme Court, they would try to fill the seat that is vacant, and they refuse to fill the seat. So when Hillary Clinton gets in, which is likely from all the polls, not only will she get this seat that is already open, but she's going to get another seat because we have a couple of justices that are near death's door, or who want to retire. So here's the thing. I think if the Republicans really cared about the Supreme Court, they'd be having hearings right now instead of campaigning back home.
All right, Richard, Steve, thanks for coming in today. And I think some of them would take exception to your comment, Richard.
They didn't realize they were at death's door.
Pretty sure they
Poor
would.
people.
That would be some breaking news in their lives, right?
My.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Be with me. So we will find out in moments.
On we go. So, as you know, the third and final presidential debate takes place in just 6 days. Fox News anchor Chris Wallace will moderate. He is revealing his questions will cover 6 topics, though not necessarily in this order: debt and entitlements, immigration, the economy, the Supreme Court, foreign hotspots, and fitness to be president. A lot to pack in. Where will he go first, we wonder? We will see. Howard Kurtz is Fox News media analyst and the host of Media Buzz. Howard, good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
So thoughts on that, first of all?
Well, the third debate was always going to be crucial because it's the one closest to the election. Now I think the importance is on steroids because it will have to be dealt with. The latest mounting allegations of groping and unwanted kissing against Donald Trump in outlets like the New York Times and People magazine, and the WikiLeaks disclosures drip, drip, drip against Hillary Clinton. And both candidates are going to run into Chris Wallace, who by wide acclaim is considered one of the best interviewers in the business. I thought this long before I came to Fox News. He has a very blunt but civil style of asking questions, and he is very good at pinning down candidates. I think one of the reasons he was picked was because of the performance that he turned in with Megyn Kelly and Bret Baier in the GOP primary debates.
Absolutely, and I'm sure the solid questioning that he does on Fox News Sunday as well. So we're going to all look forward to that, to be sure. Here's a soundbite from Donald Trump talking about the Commission on Presidential Debates. Let's watch.
That so-called Commission on Presidential Debates, the head guy used to work for Bill Clinton. Did you know that? I just found that out. The head guy worked for Bill Clinton. Ay, what a rigged deal this is. But here's the story. I have no respect for that group, by the way. I have none. It sounds good. Presidential Commission, give me a break. Because we're dealing against a very dishonest system.
So is that criticism fair?
Mike McCurry, who Trump is referring to, is indeed a former White House press secretary for Bill Clinton, but he is the co-chairman of the commission. The other co-chairman, as you know, is Frank Fahrenkopf, a former chairman of the RNC. So it's a fair and balanced commission, which for the first time in the 20-year history of Fox News picked moderators not only from CNN and NBC and ABC and CBS, but one from Fox. So I'm not quite sure why Trump is upset with the commission.
Yeah, understood. All right, let's talk about Donna Brazile, because yesterday we reported that one of the questions that was asked of Hillary Clinton in a primary town hall sounded quite a bit like a question that she had sent an email about, and, you know, made in reference to, well, sometimes I get to look at the questions ahead of time. But yesterday, later, Howard, it came out that, in fact, there was a verbatim, it was verbatim, the version that was in an email of hers. Flesh this out for us.
Well, you know, I was willing to give Donna Brazile the benefit of the doubt. I spoke to her. She said she was flabbergasted that she never got any questions from CNN. But now we learn that the co-moderator of that town hall debate last March with both Clinton and Bernie Sanders was Roland Martin, and that he had sent an email with, among the questions he was going to ask was one on the death penalty. And again, the wording was almost precise to what Donna Brazile, who was a CNN contributor at the time, as well as vice chair of the DNC, sent to the Clinton campaign saying, here's one that I'm worried about. So she could have gotten it from Roland Martin. This does not look good for her. It does not look good for CNN. And it adds to the perception out there that there is certain coziness between some members of the mainstream media, commentators, journalists, and others.
I mean,
and the Hillary
shocking.
Clinton
Nobody
campaign.
should have any access to those questions. You know, the American people expect a very fair process, and that everybody comes in there with the same amount of you know, understanding of what could come at them, which is anything, basically, within the confines of the subjects that are discussed. I want to get your thoughts on the New York Times, because Donald Trump says that he is suing them, that the stories that they printed about these two women are very thin in terms of the substantiation.
Well, I don't think we'll ever see this lawsuit, because that would open Donald Trump up to discovery. And look, these are two women who are telling their stories on the record, no anonymous sources. The Times did talk to other people who they had confided in either months ago or even years ago. At the same time, I think it's fair to question, why is this coming out now? You know, why we have these women, we have the People magazine writer with a first-person account of being the recipient of an unwanted kiss and advance from Donald Trump. It does sort of raise questions about the timing, and of course, given the nature of this and coming after the Access Hollywood tape and the debate in which Trump told Anderson Cooper he may have engaged in locker room talk but didn't actually do these things, this is going to, I think, dominate the media coverage for the next couple of days. The story, I can't know whether the New York Times story is accurate and whether these women are, in fact, telling the truth. But there are so many women now telling versions of this that the Trump campaign is going to be forced to respond. And, of course, is probably going to blame the Clinton campaign, although there's no evidence that I know of at this point the Clinton team had anything to do with these stories.
It's interesting. We talked to Jerry Falwell earlier, and he said he had a talk with Donald Trump last night on the phone, and Donald Trump told him that he has emails that will prove that the women are not telling the truth. So I've asked the campaign about that, and that may be the next shoe to drop in some of this. So, Howard, we will see.
Look forward to seeing that.
Thank you very much.
Tells the Palm Beach Post that Trump groped her in 2003. A receptionist who says that Trump kissed her at Trump, woman who says Trump touched her on an airplane more than 3 decades ago.
I don't think I said a word. During the late 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, culture had instilled in us that somehow it was our fault. The attention that we received from men, that we were responsible for their behavior. You didn't complain to the authorities. You didn't complain to your boss. If something happened to you, you just bucked up and you went on.
None of the women whose stories we just mentioned ever went to the police at the time, so there's no years-old official records of any of it. They're basically saying that they saw Trump say that he never went any further than locker room talk with anybody, and they think that they can disprove that. Martha?
All right, so Donald Trump's lawyer is sending a response to the New York Times. What did he say?
It's a demand for a retraction, Martha. The Trump legal team thinks that the New York Times story is libelous because they do not believe that the New York Times properly vetted the accuser's stories. And we've seen a copy of this letter that was sent overnight. Part of what Trump's lawyer writes is this, quote, "It is apparent from, among other things, the timing of the article that it is nothing more than a politically motivated effort to defeat Mr. Trump's candidacy." And the campaign's spokesman, Jason Miller, adds this, quote, "To reach back decades in an attempt to smear Mr. Trump trivializes sexual assault, and it sets a new low for where the media is willing to go in its efforts to determine this election." Now, just as your show was starting about 3 minutes ago, we did get the first tweet from Trump. He waited a while to respond to this one on social media, but he wrote, quote, "The phony story in the failing NY Times is a total fabrication written by the same people as last discredited story on women." Watch. The Trump campaign is also putting forward a theory. They think that the Times is putting a lot of emphasis on this so that there's not as much talk about embarrassing details contained in the Clinton campaign's recently released hacked messages.
Yeah.
Martha?
Wow. More to come. Peter, thanks.
Time to get to that right now, because on the inside the Clinton camp, they're dealing with more damaging emails released by WikiLeaks. This time, new messages hacked from campaign manager John Podesta, revealing multiple staffers talking about Clinton's emails and which ones to turn over to comply with a House subpoena. A conversation that happened weeks before the server was wiped clean. Clinton aide Huma Abedin also appeared to question whether or not Clinton could keep avoiding reporters. The email reads as such: "Can we survive not answering questions from press at message events?" Her David Dinkins forum speech and immigration message broke through because we did not take questions. Her community bank's message got lost because she answered questions about the Clinton Foundation and emails. Okay, so here's a conversation trying to strategize as to whether or not they need to face reporters. Chris Stirewalt, good morning to you, co-host of I'll Tell You What. And I'll tell you what, how long did she go without answering a fair number of questions from reporters? It was months, right?
Yeah, two-thirds of a year. She went a real long time in the bunker. And it was bad advice she got, because every time that a Trump scandal or a Trump outrage sort of bled off the stage, the focus always turned back through this election to Hillary Clinton and her emails and the server and the scandals. And instead of ever answering it in a decent, decorous way, what did she do? She hid from the press, and it stayed out there. And that is sort of the story of Clintonism, that by evading, that by ducking the press and by ducking these things, they make things even worse for themselves.
By my count, she has not had an official press conference yet. She answered questions on the tarmac. She answered questions on the airplane, but there has been no declarative. We will be here at this time on this date in this setting, and we will have a formal press conference. Right?
Until she answers questions from you, I will not be satisfied.
I appreciate that.
But she has logged enough time with enough gaggles with enough reporters now, and now Trump's the one who doesn't do press conferences. She's the one, she gaggles with reporters, and whether we call it a gaggle or a press conference, she's answering questions from reporters now, and Trump's the one who's hiding.
Okay, now we've got the basket of deplorables, which apparently has gotten bigger. Okay, now this is an exchange of emails also in WikiLeaks, Chris. This is Sandy Newman in contact with John Podesta. Quote: "There needs to be a Catholic spring in which Catholics themselves demand the end of a Middle Ages dictatorship and the beginning of a little democracy and respect for gender equality in the Catholic Church. I have not thought at all about how one would plant the seeds of the revolution or who would plant them, just wondering," end quote. This is a pattern that we have discovered now about Catholics and evangelicals and people in the South and rednecks. They spared no one.
True, and I would think Cardinal John Newman, the first American saint, probably wouldn't be too impressed if somebody who shared his name took the opinion about an uprising against the magisterium of the Catholic Church. I mean, you know, but liberal Democrats don't like religion very much. That's sort of that's sort of a thing. Conservatives tend to be much more devout than liberals do. That's something we've known. However, Democrats do rely on a lot of Catholic voters, especially in states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. And maybe somebody like Pat Toomey, in a bid to hold on in Pennsylvania as the Republican nominees' numbers slip southward in the state, maybe somebody like Pat Toomey can use this message to try to rally Catholic voters on his behalf.
One more thing. Needy Latinos in one easy call. What was that about?
I don't know whether
he wasn't talking there about needy Latinos as in poor Latinos. He was saying that these people are Latinos who are needy of some attention, some belly scratching that goes on in politics where you go and pay attention to people even when you don't mean it. I don't think it had anything to do with them being Latinos. I think it just had to do with them being annoying.
Well, there's that. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Thanks, Chris.
You bet. You bet.
So
now the FBI's decision not to prosecute Hillary Clinton for mishandling classified information, causing a split inside the agency. An insider telling Fox News that career agents and investigators believed without exception that Mrs. Clinton should have faced charges. And then they say they were shocked when they heard these words from James Comey early July.
In looking back at our investigations into the mishandling or removal of classified information, we cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts. We are expressing to justice our view that no charges are appropriate in this case.
Peter Schweizer, author of Clinton Cash and also executive producer of the documentary based on that book. And Peter, good morning to you and welcome back here. Can you match the reporting from our folks here at Fox about those who are dismayed on the inside of the FBI?
Yes. In fact, I was up in Washington, D.C. about 10 days ago doing some business and talked to people that had been in law enforcement at the federal level and also prosecutors who said the same thing. They did not know of a current FBI agent who was familiar with the case who did not think that Hillary Clinton should face legal jeopardy because of her actions in the email case.
Here's the quote. Safe to say the vast majority felt she should be prosecuted. Here's another one. Unanimous that we all thought her security clearance should have been yanked. So they hear these words from Comey and says, basically, the case is closed, Peter.
Yeah, that's the case that Comey makes. I think what a lot of agents are frustrated about is they believe in basically the old FBI, that they were going to take on whoever they needed to take on if they were powerful individuals or, ordinary Americans who had violated the law. And this kind of goes to the heart of the credibility of the FBI. If they're going to have different legal standards for people in positions of authority and power like Hillary Clinton than ordinary Americans who are being prosecuted, by the way. You have the guy out in California who's taking pictures inside the submarine to show family members who's facing legal prosecution under the same statute of Hillary Clinton, sharing classified information. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and they may have been disgruntled, but they lost, Peter.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. What's interesting about the emails that have been coming out, Bill, is we now know, first of all, that the Clinton team, these hacked emails, that the Clinton team completely underestimated the importance of this story. They basically poo-pooed it in early 2015, and then you have these emails where they're talking about what are we going to release, what are we not going to release, which was basically in complete defiance of the Freedom of Information Act requests that have been filed, and also the action on Capitol Hill that was asking for Hillary Clinton's team to turn over all their emails.
Now context
it's pretty shocking.
On that timeline is all in the month of March of 2015. At the end of the month is when you had the server wiped clean. At the beginning of the month, you find the following emails such as this. Philip Raines works on Hillary Clinton's team, an aide to her. Rather than going around and around on how to release the 55,000, let's just be for what's happening and use this as the excuse. Because we can say even if state has equities, not providing them, meaning the emails, would put her in legal jeopardy. Or we say happy for them to have it, happy for the public to read them. As soon as state is comfortable, let's somehow take advantage of this, end quote. The point in all this is they were trying to figure out how they could paint this in the best light possible. And remember, that was an email that was written on the 4th of March of that month, 2015. Within 4 weeks, the server was wiped clean and all the emails were gone.
That's right. The interesting question in this bill, of course, is these emails were obtained through a hack, obviously, but The information is there. It has not been challenged. The question is, does this reopen a legal case?
Does it?
Against either Hillary Clinton? You know, I'm not an attorney, but I would say they need to look at this because it clearly goes to this question of you get just a little bit later this congressional subpoena requesting these records, and they're using BleachBit basically to wipe this clean. This certainly shows the intentionality that the FBI director claimed he didn't have at the time.
Peter, thank you. Peter Schweitzer, a lot to go through on this. Thanks again out of Tallahassee today. Thank you, Peter.
Donald Trump firing back at multiple new claims that he acted inappropriately with women. 2 women have come forward to the New York Times, and they have accused him of kissing and groping them without their consent, once at Mar-a-Lago. The other one was on an airplane. One accuser told her story on camera, explaining how it all went down on a plane 30 years ago.
The stewardess asked me would I like to move up to first class? And I sat down next to a young man, blonde, tall, and he introduced himself as Donald Trump. Somehow or another, the armrest in the seat disappeared, and it was a real shock. All of a sudden, his hands were all over me.
So Donald Trump has responded this morning on Twitter a couple of times. This is one of them. The phony story in the failing New York Times is a total fabrication, written by the same people as last discredited story on women. Watch! Exclamation point, all in caps. Doug Schoen, former advisor to President Bill Clinton, Monica Crowley, online opinion editor for the Washington Times, both are Fox News contributors. So what do you think? What about the latest, Monica?
Well, good morning, Martha. This looks like a classic political hit job on Donald Trump. Clearly, this is a coordinated attack on him. We know from the WikiLeaks disclosures that there is coordinated collusion between the Clinton campaign and the mainstream media, including organs like the New York Times. I think they ought to be very careful proceeding. Number one, Donald Trump has said this is complete fiction, and he intends to pursue legal action, possibly. But the more important thing I think they need to be very careful about going forward with these stories on Donald Trump is twofold. One, Bill Clinton has his own history with women, which Mrs. Clinton has been allegedly involved in the efforts to destroy the women who have accused her husband, and she's the one on the ballot. But more importantly, I think, this has the potential to backfire and turn Donald Trump into a sympathetic figure. That if voters take a look at this and perceive this as a massive pile-on Donald Trump in the coordinated way that we just laid out here, it could turn him into a sympathetic figure.
What if people out there believe the women?
Donald Trump as a victim, which
I hear what you're saying. It's possible. But what if they believe these accounts? Then it goes the other way.
Well, they could, but look, and if that is the case, then I don't think it changes much, because if you're a woman and you already think that Donald Trump is a sexist, your mind isn't going to be changed by this either way.
You know, in a way, Doug, I feel like we're back in 1992, because I remember right before that election, there was this storm of women, right, with these salacious, awful stories. And in a bizarre turn of events, it may be that Donald Trump needs to turn to the Clinton playbook from 1992, because when that happened, he responded with none of this is true, which Donald Trump is doing. But, you know, you had the Jennifer Flowers, you had the Paula Jones, you had all these people coming out and telling their horrific stories, which back then, to our virgin ears, seemed a little bit more horrific even than they do now, given what we're getting used to. But then they sat down on a couch together and did an interview. And Hillary, you know, said, I'm not some Tammy Wynette standing by my man. I trust my husband, and here we are.
Well, that interview, as I recollect, was around the time of the New Hampshire primary, not at the end of the campaign.
So much earlier.
And my recollection of the end of the campaign was mostly on the failed Bush economy and the need for change. But look, Donald Trump has bigger problems than just the women and the video. He has a quarter to a third of Republican elected officials and leaders having defected permanently or temporarily. Paul Ryan and he are in a war. Republicans have been saying, Donald, fight the Democrats and Hillary, not the Republicans. And the so-called unshackled Donald Trump is fighting multiple battles, multiple wars, and it's not quite clear that his central focus is Secretary Clinton. Her poll numbers are up from where they were before the video, Martha. The debate might have helped them marginally, according to NBC. But you know what?
So you just think he's got way too many slings and arrows coming his way?
Yeah, and
another one is this
and a
People
divided
magazine
party.
one.
Yes,
let's put the People magazine up, and this is a woman named Natasha Stoyanov who covered him. She was a beat reporter for People magazine. She got to know him, got to know Melania, and she says that they walked into the room alone. This is at Mar-a-Lago, and he shut the door behind them. I turned around, she says, and within seconds he was pushing me against a wall. This is while his wife, according to this story, had gone upstairs. So this is Donald Trump's tweet in response to that. He says, why didn't the writer of the 12-year-old article in People magazine mention the, quote, incident in her story? Because it did not happen, says Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, the problem here is that nobody knows the facts. Nobody was in these rooms, right? And it's a he said, she said situation. But more importantly, every time Donald Trump has to fend off some of these charges, he is not talking about the issues that the American people care about. And I think maybe that's why it's not having the kind, I mean, it's having some traction. It has affected his polls a bit. But it's not having probably the devastating impact that the Clinton campaign hoped it would, because the American people understand that this country has serious problems. Donald Trump should be talking about those. I understand he's got to parry these charges. He should be talking about and saying, look, if you need to reach back 12 or 30 years to find an attack with which to smear me, I understand, because Mrs. Clinton, you cannot run on your record. But this country has serious issues, and I am here to offer concrete solutions to those problems.
You know, you just hear the disgust in so many people that you talk to. Sure. And I do think that there's kind of a, you know, enough already.
It's too much.
And I think that on both sides, people would find it very refreshing, Doug, if one of these candidates was smart enough to, you know, kind of pull this back around. Donald Trump needs it more than she does at the moment. But, you know, not even tweet. Should he not even be responding to this stuff, Monica?
Well, this is why you have surrogates. I don't believe that a candidate for president should be punching down. This is punching down. This is why he has surrogates to handle situations like this.
Yeah, and this is why this is a problem, because he's not talking about the issues. He is unshackled, and that means more punching down, less talk of the issues, a better situation for the Secretary of State.
Thanks, you guys. Great job, as always. Good to see you both. Bill?
Wouldn't you think that Paul Ryan would call and say, good going? You'd think that they'd say, great going, Don. Let's go. Let's beat this crook. She's a crook. Let's beat her. We got to stop it. No, he doesn't do that. There's a whole deal going on there. So, I mean, you know, there's a whole deal going on. We're going to figure it out. I always figure things out. But there's a whole sinister deal going on.
So that from Florida yesterday, Trump ripping into Paul Ryan, vowing to get to the bottom of the Republican establishment's opposition to his campaign. One point called it sinister. Well, New York Congressman Peter King's a member of the House Homeland Security Committee. He is a Republican. Sir, good morning to you back in your home district.
Good morning, Bill.
What do you think's going on here? And how injurious could this be, do you believe, to your party?
Yeah, well, I am supporting Donald Trump, and I'm a good friend of Paul Ryan. I hope the two of them can find a way to coordinate their efforts going into November, going toward Election Day. Donald Trump should not be fighting with Paul Ryan. On the other hand, you shouldn't have so many Republicans panicking the way they did over the weekend and be walking away from Donald Trump before he even had a chance to explain himself or have the debate. I think there was too much hysteria in those first few days. If Congress want to focus in their own district, I understand that. But going out of their way that first 24 or 48 hours to distance themselves before they even knew all the facts just created this almost like a tidal wave of hysteria over the weekend. So I understand why Donald Trump was angry. He had come off a big debate. He had done very well. He had stopped the bleeding. And then he sees Republicans walking away from him. So I understand why he did it. On the other hand, it's counterproductive because there's no reason why he should be fighting with Paul Ryan. All Donald Trump should be saying is, listen, I don't expect everyone to be lined up with me. I come in this race as an independent mind. I'm going to continue that way. I would like their support. If I get it, fine. But if not, all of us are going forward. I'm representing the people. Don't be taking shots off to the side or below you. I mean, just focus on straight ahead. Accentuate the positive.
Some endorsed, unendorsed, and then endorsed again. A few of them did that.
Yeah, and that was, to me, it makes no sense. First of all, listen, if you have real objections, if you are morally opposed, if you have something to stand on and you want to withdraw an endorsement, fine. But I don't know what came out again about Donald Trump over the weekend or on Friday which was so different from what we've been hearing all along. And so these people were more than willing to stand with Donald Trump when his poll numbers were going up, when he was running even with Hillary Clinton, and then to suddenly abandon him when the first shot is fired. I don't think it wins them any voters. I think Democrats and independents see through that, and then the Trump base is going to turn against them. So just from a purely political point of view, unless they have real moral convictions on this, that's one thing. But if they're just doing it for political cover, it's not going to work, because people see through that. Democrats see through it, and Republicans see through it.
You said Trump might be too New York for some Republicans. I don't know what that means, but answer that or clarify that. And what do you think of the effect of, the past 12 hours is on some of your fellow Republicans with these accusations?
When I said, I think I've said that several times. Basically, his style is more rough and tumble. It's when somebody punches him, he automatically punches back. We do that in New York. I mean, he and I both grew up in Queens. His neighborhood was a little bit better than mine. But it is that street corner type style, which I think other parts of the country maybe don't adapt to right away. But as far as the last 12 hours, listen, the New York Times is turning into the National Enquirer. I have no idea what the facts are in those situations. But for the New York Times to be going out of their way to find these stories, again, it's up to Donald Trump. It's going to be his word against theirs. I have no idea what's the validity of it. But to me, for people like the New York Times to be putting all this effort into these stories and virtually ignoring what's being said about Hillary Clinton with WikiLeaks, which are also maybe rumors, who knows. But the New York Times, to me, it's a lot more important to be focused